robes, big long flowing dress type robes, and when it says to gird yourself up, it usually means to take your robe and just pick it up in between your legs and kind of tuck it in so you can run or work or stand or step up high. Pretty much he's telling this Job to say, hey, get up on your feet and get ready to answer for all this stuff that you've been talking about. You know, you're fitting to answer me like a man. Verse 4, where was thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare if thou hast understanding. Now, if you read the very first verse of the Bible, it says, in the beginning God, and it talks about, light. He just spoke it into existence. He says, in the beginning, where was you at? Can you even fathom? Can you understand that I could just say the words and stuff happens? Where was you at when this was going on? 5, who hath laid the measures thereof, if thou knowest, and who hath stretched the line upon it? This is kind of referring to building stuff, using measuring tapes and, chalk lines and whatever. He says, where was you at when I was putting things together and making all this stuff? 6, whereupon are the foundations therefore or thereof fastened, and who laid the cornerstones thereof? That's a good question. How does everything stay together in this world? How does the world stay this far from the sun? How does the moon not fly off its axis? And he's saying all this stuff because how small is God for you to not trust in Him to be over your life and not believe that He's got your life in His best intentions when He's able to keep all this other stuff together and going. 7, when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. These morning star and the sons of God are both referring to angels. And when God was building this place and putting all this stuff together, that means the angels were shouting for joy. That's odd to think about, but that's what it means. 8, or who shut up the sea with doors when it brake forth as if it had issued out of the womb. That's talking about the sea, putting the borders around the sea, just not letting it go all over the land. The seashores put borders around all the edges of the sea, and it just didn't overtake everything. Probably referring to the flood. It's kind of neat to think about. When I made, this is verse 9, the cloud of the garment thereof, and the thick darkness of swaddling, or swaddle band for it. It's talking about the sky and the darkness and the air and everything, how it kind of just, the swaddling band is the thing that wraps around the baby. So he's saying, how is darkness wrapped around the earth and everything at nighttime, how everything's black and everything's kind of kept together. And break up, 9, 10, and break up for it may decreed place and set bars and doors. And said, here there too shall thou come, but no further, and here shall thy proud waves be stand. Maybe all this was referring to the ocean. It's kind of hard to tell. But just think about it. Why don't how the water falls and everything kind of just recycles, and all this rain falls into the oceans, how come that never gets any higher? You ever thought about that, how things work? That's what he's saying. I mean, have you ever really contemplated how things work and how I keep the edges of the sea not from rising and just overtaking everything, and how everything works. And you're asking all these questions about, hey, I'm not supposed to be suffering like this. God's trying to make a point here that, He's so much greater than you can even fathom. How many of us sit up at nighttime and worry about the earth imploding or coming off its axis or something crazy? God's got that. God's got the earth. The sun's gonna come up in the morning, and you worry about things in life, or you sit out on your pity pot and complain about your life to everybody, and you say things to God. I've shouted things to God. You mean like Lieutenant Dan up in the ship bow and cussing God and all that stuff. He tries to put in perspective, how much He does for us without us even knowing it. 12, hast thou commanded the morning since the days, and caused the day spring to know its place? That's what we just talked about, that it may or might take hold of the ends of the earth, that the wicked might be shaken out of it. It is turned as clay to the seal, and the stand as a garment. And from the wicked their light is withheld, and the high arm shall be broken. Hast thou entered into the springs of the sea, or hast thou walked in the search of the depth? Did you know parts of the sea are over 6 miles deep? We've never been able to get as deep as the sea is, still to this day. Never been to the very bottom of the deepest part.
You got 6 miles in.
Well, that's a guesstimation at least. That's crazy to think about, ain't it? This is 18, hast thou perceived the breadth of the earth? Declare if thou knowest it all. He says, do you know anything about all this stuff, Job? Do you understand how it works? Where's the wave where light dwelleth, and as for darkness, where is the place thereof? That was verse 19. Now, we could think about light and dark. Darkness is the absence of light, and, light is the absence of darkness, or, it's a vague answer for that question, but they're like scientists that try to figure out what light is, and it's like unexplainable. To like put your mind around what makes things light and what makes things dark. Have you really, really just thought about it? I mean, this is like some crazy stuff to think about, but we know that things are made with atoms and molecules and stuff that is held together, and light is just one of those things they don't really know much about, other than it displaces darkness. 20, that thou shouldest take it to the bound thereof, and that thou shouldest know the paths to the house thereof. And that's talking about the light. Where's it from, or where's it come from, or how is it put up? 21, knowest thou it because the west been born, and because the number of the days is great? Hast thou entered into the treasure of the snow, or hast thou seen the treasure of the hail? That's talking about the weather, how snow and hail falls. 23, which I have reserved against the time of trouble, against the day of battle and war. And you'll see in a couple of spots in the Bible that God uses hail and like inclement weather, like bad weather, to help win battles, and that's what he's referring to. I think it would be neat if you went to war and then all of a sudden it started hailing golf ball size or basketball size hail over there where you're fighting at, and it helps you win. That's crazy to think about. That would be God helping you. who hath, what was that? 24, by what way is the light parted, which scattereth the east winds upon the earth? Who hath divided a water course for the overflowing of waters, or a water from the lightning and thunder? Which we know a lot of the answers to some of these questions now because we have science, but could you imagine back then not knowing what the light in the sky was? Like you didn't really know how to harness electricity and the way electricity worked. You just seen clouds lighting up, and you seen thunderbolts hitting the ground, and light going from thunderbolt, lightning bolts, whatever. Thunderbolt. What was a thunderbolt? Thunderbolt. Something's called a thunderbolt. Is it a car? It got turned back down. Somebody turned it back down. All the way back down. Uh, 26, to cause it to rain on the earth where no man is, on the wilderness wherein there is no man, to satisfy the desolate waste ground, and to cause the bud of the tender herb to spring forth. Now, I did read something that was curious to me, and it was kind of neat to think about. This is talking about where nobody lives at. Why does it rain, and why does things grow? This will put things into perspective for you. If nobody's ever been to a spot and there's like beautiful plants growing, and you showed up and you were the first one there to see it, and you would ask the question, why does all this pretty stuff grow here? Why is all this growing here? Well, think about this. Would God grow it so he could look at it? Why it was pretty to look at, why wouldn't he just grow it for himself? That's why we're here. This is in reference to what we were talking about. 27, to satisfy the desolate and waste ground, to cause the bud of the tender herb to spring forth. It's talking about the rain and all the stuff growing up. Hath the rain a father? Question. Or who hath begotten the drops of dew? This is asking questions. Do you know how this, or do you know who, or do you know what, or why this stuff is happening? 29, out of whose womb came the ice, and the hoy of frost of heaven, who hath gendered it? Gendered it? Who gives it birth? Gendered it. 30, the waters are hid as with a stone, and the face of the deep is frozen. Canst thou bind the sweet influences of Pleiades, or loose the bands of Orion? And when God spoke in the light and the lights in the sky and all this stuff, this is talking about the constellations in the sky. 32, canst thou bring out a Mazaroth in his season, or canst thou guide the Arcturus with his sons? The Arcturus these are all constellations, but I think this is cool. The Arcturus, whatever it is normally the constellation in the sky that we mistaken for the Little Dipper. You can't see the Little Dipper unless you're out in the middle of a desert or on top of a mountain, because it's really hard to see. But this Arcturus looks like the Little Dipper, so it's acceptable to call it the Little Dipper. I've heard somebody say that. It's neat to think about. But the biggest star, I can't remember, it may be Mazaroth, I can't remember, but the biggest star in one of these constellations is like hundreds of times bigger than our sun. It's like way, way bigger than our sun. I just thought it was neat. I didn't write none of it down, but I was thinking to myself.
Would that be that star?
The North Star? No, it ain't the North Star. I think the North Star is just a close, really close star.
Oh, okay.
But think about all this stuff that God made and put into action. And we worry about little bitty things. I know things don't seem little in our life most of the time, but I always use that thing about Lily and her shoes not, being tied, and her flipping out about the shoe not tied, having a meltdown. And I'm thinking like 30, what am I, 35, 36? Well, this is last year, so I was 30. I was probably 35 maybe. I'm just thinking to myself, look, it don't matter how old I am. I'm thinking 30 years later, 20 years later, however many years later, is she going to be looking back at this meltdown she had about this untied shoe thing? You're not going to remember it, and that's the point. When we're in heaven a million years from now, you're going to look back at the 70 years you had on earth, or 80 or 90 years, or however many years. You're going to be like, man, that cancer or that tumor or that sickness I had, or that all that stuff just seems so small. I have to think about stuff like that, put things into perspective. What was I at? 33. Knowest the ordinance of the heaven, canst thou set the dominion thereof in the earth? Canst thou lift up thy voice to the clouds, that abundance of water may cover it? Now, if you can do this, do something else. If you can holler at the clouds and make it rain, you're doing something. 35, can thou send lightning that they may go and say unto thee, here we are? He's pretty much saying, can you make lightning strike where you want it to strike at? No. None of us can. But guess what? God can. That's the point. Who hath put wisdom in the inward parts, or who hath given understanding to the heart? Who can number the clouds in wisdom, or who can stay the bottles of heaven? When the dust goeth into hardness, and the clots are cleaved fast together, wilt thou hunt the prey for the lion, and fill the appetite of the young lions? He goes, when there's a drought over there in India or wherever lions are from, do you go over there and feed the lions? No. I make sure the lions get fed. When the couch of their dens, and abide in the cover to lie in wait. Let's still talk about lions. Who provideth for the ravens his food, when his young ones cry unto God? They wander for lack of meat. He's saying, Job, are you feeding the ravens? Are you feeding the birds? You have to worry about feeding the birds. And the thing is you don't worry about what the lions are eating or what the birds are eating. Why are you worried about what's going on with you, Job? 39. This is chapter 39. Knowest thou the time when the wild goats of the rock bring forth? He's saying, do you know when the goats are going to bring forth young? Or do you know or canst thou mark when the hinds do calve? He's saying, do you know the mating and when the goats are going to have their babies and whatnot? And it puts into perspective when let's finna start talking about birds. When just things do certain stuff, how do they know to do it? Like birds migrate from north to south. It's put in them by God, and we think It's just crazy. It blows my mind what it does. It makes me think. Verse 2, canst thou number the months that they fulfill, or knowest thou the time when they bring forth? It's talking about these goats having kids, or baby goats. What do you call baby goats? Kids. They bow themselves, they bring forth their young ones and cast out their sorrows. Their young ones are in good liking. They grow up with corn. They grow forth and return not unto them. Who hath sent out the wild ass free? Or who hath loosed the bands of the wild ass? Who howls that I have made the wilderness and the barren land his dwellings. Kind of self-explanatory. He scorneth the multitude of the city, neither regarding the crying of the driver. The range of the mountains, here is his pastures. He searcheth after every green thing. Will the unicorn be willing to serve thee, or abide by thy crib? Now, when it says unicorn, don't get that all mixed up with like a mythical unicorn. It means the one-horned animal, which is probably a rhinoceros or something like that. Rhinoceros. So, are you going to be able to grab a rhinoceros and plow a field with it? No. Not a chance. Canst thou bind the unicorn or the rhinoceros, his band, and the furrow? Or will he harrow the valleys after thee? Let's talk about plowing the ground. Will thou trust him because he has strength and great, or is great? Or wilt thou leave thy labor to him? Wilt thou believe in him that he will bring home thy seed and gather it into thy barn? You're not going to trust this kind of an animal like you would a donkey, like an ox or something like that. They're untamable, is what he's getting at. Givest thou the goodly wings unto the peacocks, or wings and feathers unto the ostrich? And he's asking, did you give these animals homes? Can you do this with this animal? Did you give the birds the feathers? And it makes you put things into perspective on it. And he's still talking about the ostrich, verse 14, which leaveth her eggs in the earth, and warmeth them in the dust, and forgetteth that the foot may crush them, or that the wild beast may break them. She is hardened against her young ones, as though they were not hers. Her labor is in vain without fear, because God hath deprived her of wisdom, neither hath he imparted to her understanding. What time she lifteth up herself on high, she scorneth the horse and his rider. Hast thou given the horse strength? Okay. The ostrich, not a very bright bird. You know, there's some smart birds in this world, but the ostrich ain't one of them. But guess what? When she stands up and takes off running, she can outrun a horse. That's why she stays alive. You know, she can run from stuff that's trying to eat her. And she puts these eggs, and now if you study this, they'll lay an egg and like make a burrow and lay an egg and like get it covered up so it'll stay warm. But if she's got another egg, she'll just leave it on top of the ground next to the other one. Like she won't even try to cover it up. And that's the way God made her. That's weird, ain't it? And how do they survive this long without being extinct if they don't care nothing about how their eggs are laid or where they're laid or how they're?
Maybe a whole bunch of them come out of that one.
I don't know. I wonder if they're like a chicken and lay an egg a day.
I don't know, but I busted one in 3 Oaks, so.
Sand sharks the same way.
We wonder why birds do what they do and all the animals do what they do and migration and all this stuff, and God puts it in their mind. It's instinct. 19, hast thou given the horse strength? Did you give the horses strength, Job? Can you do that? Can you make a horse strong? Hast thou clothed his neck with the thunder? Canst thou make him afraid as a grasshopper? The glory of his nostrils is terrible. His paweth in the valley and rejecteth in his strength. Rejoiceth in his strength. He goeth on to meet the armed men. He smocketh at fear, and is not affrighted, neither turneth his back from the sword. The quiver rattle against him, the glittering spear, or the shield. He swalloweth the ground with the fierceness of rain, neither believeth he that it is the sound of the trumpet. He saith among the trumpets, Ha, ha, and the smelleth of the battle afar off, the thunder of the captains, and the shouting doeth the and he's talking about how fearless a horse is, how fast it can run, how he swallows up the ground when he runs, how he's not scared of the trumpets, how he smells battle, he can smell a battle afar off. He says, are you the one that made the horse like that, Job?
I think he's talking about how it's skittish, but it's also not afraid or used to. He said afraid.
Yeah, it may
afraid
be
of the
that.
grasshopper, but then will run head first in the battle. Because the horse is skittish.
Can you make him
Until
afraid
you
of
train
a
him.
grasshopper? Anyway, he's pointing out the horse. He's saying, can you make the horse be like that? No. I made him that way. It's pretty much what he's trying to say. Does the hawk fly by thy wisdom and stretch her wings towards the south? And that's neat to think about. Birds have been flying south for the winter, even in Job's day. Does the eagle mount up at the commandment and make her nest on high? She dwelleth and abideth on the rock, upon the crag of the rock, and the strong place. From thence she seeketh the prey of her eyes, behold afar off. Her young ones also suck up blood, and where the slain are, there is she. Did you make the eagle, did you make her wise enough to build up high so she could see everywhere? Did you make her be able to see good so she could see afar off? No, Job, you didn't. And I like how he answers the one question, or he answers all of his questions with a bunch of questions. Okay, chapter 40. Moreover, the Lord answered Job and said, shall he that contendeth with the Almighty instruct him? He's saying, Job, I just told you all this stuff that I can do. Are you trying to tell me how to do things? Are you trying to instruct me how to do stuff, is what he's saying? I'm God. I made all this stuff. I put the earth into rotation. I built, just by speaking it, I made it happen. I made all these animals act the way they do. And you're trying to tell me that, you're trying to tell me what I need to be doing. And what he's pointing at is all the way back to when Job was saying, I don't deserve the stuff that I'm going through. He's saying my sin, and Job's friends was telling Job that he was a sinner, and that's why he was going through all this stuff. Job lost his house, all of his people, all of his kids, all of his land, all of his animals, his health. He got really sick. And Job says, you know what? I'm not a sinner. I'm not a sinful man. I don't deserve all this stuff. He didn't say he wasn't sinless, but he would do the sacrifices like he was supposed to. And what Job was really saying is, I don't deserve what I'm getting compared to what I've done in my life. And God comes back and says, you know, I've done all this. I run this place, and you're trying to tell me that I'm not treating you right, or that I'm not being just with you. It's kind of what the meaning here is with all these questions. You're trying to instruct me, right? He that reproveth God, let him answer it. 3. Then Job answered the Lord and said, behold, and you know, Job, we don't went through 2 or 3 chapters right here. Job didn't say nothing. And Job said, I'm a vile, behold, I am vile. What shall I answer thee? What can I say? You know, God, if you had to talk to God, what would you say to him? I'm vile, and what can I say? That's what he says. I will lay mine hand upon my mouth. Once I have spoken, but I will not answer ye twice, but I will proceed no further. Then answered the Lord unto Job. That was a pitiful answer, wasn't it? He was kind of just submitting to God, you know. I submit. I'll shut up. I understand what you're trying to tell me. Then answered the Lord unto Job out of the whirlwind. This is a storm, and I think Miss Sue missed it though. But when the storms are going on in our lives, we really don't want to listen to God, do we? Most of the time, especially when it's something that's hard to swallow. And this is when God talks to Job in the middle of a storm. This is verse 8. No. Okay, this is verse 7. This is 40, verse 7. Gird up thy loins now like a man. I will demand of thee, and declare thou unto me. Wilt thou also disannul my judgment? Wilt thou condemn me, that thou mightest be righteous? This is God talking to Job, okay? Are you gonna speak bad against my judgment? You saying I got bad judgment? Are you gonna condemn me so you can be righteous, Job? Hast thou an arm like God? Do you have an arm like me? Are you as strong as I am? I just told you all the stuff I could do. Or canst thou thunder with a voice like him? Deck thyself now with the majesty and excellence, and array thyself with glory and beauty. Cast abroad the range of thy wrath, and behold every one that is proud, and abase him. Look on every one that is proud, and bring him low, and tread down the wicked in their places. This is the stuff that the God can do. Hide them in the dust together, and bind their faces in secret. Then will I also confess unto thee that thine own right hand can save thee. Okay, if you can do all this stuff, Job, I tell you what, your own hand can save you, but you can't. You can't do it, none of it. Behold now, Behemoth, which I made with thee, he eateth grass as an ox. And Behemoth, now some of the translations say hippopotamus, some say all kinds of different stuff, but it's gonna explain the Behemoth, and I think it's a dinosaur. I really do, because it says he's got a tail like a cedar. Now I'm gonna tell you what, a hippopotamus ain't got no cedar-sized tail. It just don't. lo, talking about as he eateth, he's talking about he made this animal. He called it behemoth. It's huge. He eateth grass like an ox. 16. Lo, now his strength is in his loins, and he is fierce, or his force is in the navel of his belly. He moveth his tail like a cedar. The sinews of his stones are wrapped together. His bones are as strong as a piece of brass. His bones are like bars of iron. He is the chief of the ways of God. He that made him can make his sword to approach unto him. Surely the mountains bring him forth food, where all the beasts of the field play. He layeth under the shady trees, and the cover of the reed, and the fiends. I don't know, maybe it's supposed to say ferns. The shady trees cover him with their shadows, and the willows of the brook compass around about. Beholdeth, he drinketh up the river, and has not. He trusteth that he can draw up Jordan in his mouth. He taketh it with his eyes, his nose pierced through snares. Now that, I don't think that's hippopotamus. What does yours say? Hippopotamus? It don't say nothing about it. What kind of animal does it say? Behemoth? Does it still call it behemoth? Now, it's a big animal. And we still got 8 minutes. The Leviathan is the next animal. I think this is another dinosaur.
That will say in mind, the identification of a behemoth is disputed, ranging from an earthly creature to a mythical sea monster in ancient literature.
Yeah.
Mine says possibly the hippopotamus or the elephant. Possibly a crocodile.
Mine says elephant, hippopotamus, or dinosaur.
Well, we dig up bones of animals that are ginormous and have tails like a cedar. And the cedars back then were like the great red oak, the red, whatever the redwood trees. So that would explain like a Brontosaurus. It's huge. Who can drink up the Jordan? You drink up a whole river. A hippopotamus can't drink a river. We're talking about a big old animal. And then we're going to talk about another one. Canst thou draw out a Leviathan with a hook, or his tongue with a cord which thou lettest down? Canst thou put an hook in his nose, or bore his jaw with a thorn? Will he make my many supplications unto thee? Will he speak soft words unto thee? And when I think of the Leviathan, I think of like a dragon, because of the stuff that they say about it, or maybe some sort of fire-breathing dinosaur. And y'all laugh, but you know what? There is a beetle that is on this earth now that could spray one fluid on you and spray another fluid on you, and you just about catch on fire. So if you could have big amounts of this same fluid come out of your mouth or nose or something, and you blow air with it, don't tell me you can't blow fire.
Mine says sea monster, sea serpent.
Sea monster, sea serpent, a squid, a giant octopus. I've heard it all. I don't know what it is. Who knows what it is? Who cares what it is? He's saying, can you draw out this big ginormous thing with a hook, or make a covenant with it, or can you do all this stuff with it? And what he's talking about here is, can you do all this stuff with this ginormous animal? Can you draw him out? And it says, will thou make a covenant with thee? I'm just going to keep reading. Will thou play with him as with a bird, or will thou bind him for thy maiden? Hey, sweetheart, I got you this Leviathan. Do you want to play with it? Shall the companies make a banquet of him? Shall thou part him among the merchants? He's talking about an animal that you can't even kill. You're not even strong enough to kill it, to take it, to sell it, to cut it up, skin it out. Canst thou fill his skin with barbed iron, or his head with a fish spear? Lay thy hand upon him, remember the battle, and do no more. Behold, the hope of him is in vain. Shall not one be cast down even at the sight of him? He's saying, Job, you know this animal. They probably have these stories about these animals, or we call them dragons. It might have been a mythical creature, but you know, Job, I made this animal, and to even try to go at him with a sword is helpless. You put your hand on him, you will do no more. He will kill you. But guess what, Job? I made that animal too. Can you even fathom that? You're scared to death of this animal. You can't even kill it if you tried. But guess what? I made that animal, and you're trying to come at me and say, you know, or you're trying to tell me how to run things. You're trying to tell me how to do stuff. I built this thing, and you're trying to come at me, you know. I think we'll cut off there, and we'll finish up Job next week. You'll see Job. The beautiful thing about this is Job submitted to God in chapter 40. But you'll see in chapter 42 that Job is going to repent. And what does repent mean? It means to turn around, to stop what you're doing, turn away from what you're doing, and do the opposite of what you've been doing. Okay, so until Job repented, God did not move. Now there's a big thing to get out of this. You can submit to God and still be in the middle of all the trials and all this stuff and be going through all this crap. You could submit to God, or you can repent. And that's where the blessings really come in. Just to fill you in, I don't know how many are going to be here next week, but just kind of overview the rest of the next week when we talk about it. Job repents. God makes Job pray, or don't make him. Job prays for his friends that kind of put him down for the last 38 chapters and told him he was a sinner. And then God says to the friends, hey, you go give this stuff to Job, tell Job to pray for you. And when Job prays for the friends, God blesses Job. It's crazy to think about. How much hate do you think Job had for his friends at this point? How frustrated do you think he was with them? You've lost everything you had. Your friends come and say, hey, Job, you're a sinner. The reason you're going through all this. And now God says, hey, you know them friends that's been telling you you're a sinner and how dirty of a rotten man you are? Pray for them. That'd be a tough one to swallow. So that's where we'll be next week.